Welcome back. We're going to spend the balance of the show taking a look at big legal cases making news. I want to start by introducing our panel, and I'm excited to say they're around the table with me. Jim Kousouros, criminal defense attorney, vice president of the New York City Criminal Bar Association. Doug Von Oiste, founding partner of Carson Von Oiste, focusing on corporate misconduct, and was selected by the Legal 500 as one of the most influential trial lawyers in the nation. He graces us with his presence. And Mayo Bartlett, an attorney at the law offices of Mayo Bartlett PLLC, former chief of the Bias Crimes Unit at the Westchester County DA's office. All right, first on the docket, guys, huge developments in the New York criminal investigation into none other than the Trump organization. The nearly 2-year-long criminal investigation into former President Donald Trump's business dealings now intensifying. A special grand jury has been seated by the Manhattan DA to consider evidence and ultimately decide if the Trump organization, Trump himself, his family, or employees have committed crimes. The DA launched the investigation based on the congressional testimony of Trump's former personal lawyer, Michael Cohen.
To your knowledge, did the president or his company ever inflate assets or revenues?
Yes.
And was that done with the president's knowledge or direction?
Everything was done with the knowledge and at the direction of Mr. Trump.
Grand juries are secret, but the investigation is believed to be looking into Trump's tax returns and whether he overvalued his properties to obtain bank loans and deflated the value of those same properties to pay lower taxes. We've learned that prosecutors have already contacted witnesses to appear before the grand jury, which will reportedly be meeting 3 days a week for up to 6 months. Experts say the move suggests prosecutors feel they have evidence of a crime and are preparing to move forward with charges. The former president releasing a statement calling the new developments a witch hunt, saying in part, quote, "This is purely political and an affront to the almost 75 million voters who supported me in the presidential election, and it's being driven by highly partisan Democratic prosecutors." New York Attorney General Letitia James has now joined forces with the DA's office.
Our civil investigation continues, but we are now actively investigating the Trump organization in a criminal capacity.
All right, and Jimmy, I'll start with you. This is not about he said, she said. They got documents, and everyone I've spoken to, and you guys are close to this, but every former federal prosecutor said this is really bad in terms of the move they're making now, given the documentation, given the returns, given so much more. Trump has very good reason to be worried.
Look, I agree, but I will tell you that these are not easy cases to prove. If they do have documentation as to the inflating of values of properties, and then closely behind that or in front of that, the deflating of the values in order to avoid paying taxes on them, then that is very compelling evidence. They've been investigating for a long time. You will recall all of the litigation that they went through in order to get the tax returns. It appears as though those tax returns were a very important component of it. But I think that what's going on is that they're able now perhaps to put a voice to that paperwork. When you have a white-collar case like this that's document-centric, it is always very important and beneficial to have a voice explaining those documents, explaining how they were cultivated, why they were cultivated, at whose direction they were cultivated. So it looks to me as though they're putting those two components of the case together and they're ready to go forward.
And Doug, listen, at the end, it's about convincing a jury, assuming there's indictments that come out of that, and it goes to trial. But because of the defendant or the defendants, whether it be the organization or the extended family, as I said there, is it beyond just the jury room in that they've got to lay out a consumable case for the American public because you have an ex-president on trial, that this isn't just some clerical error that they're looking to do gotcha, that there was intent, this was long-standing that this was going on, and this was something that you, I, or the next guy couldn't do or wouldn't do? Do they have to make this easy to understand about how serious the allegations are?
Well, I think with anyone who's a potential public figure, and certainly an ex-president is, in the background of any jury trial that you would have is the fact that he was president. And is this being done, the prosecution is being done for a reason other than a vindictive reason? You heard Letitia James say her civil case now is going to be coupled with the criminal case. With a case like this, there's a lot of things that could go wrong that would be considered civil problems. This is a large organization. You still have to prove intent, criminal intent, not civil mistakes. And that's going to be a big hurdle in a case like this.
Logistically, Mayo, and I got 3 former prosecutors with me, explain what it means where you have the Manhattan DA, now you got the state attorney general doing this, you got Cy Vance with an expiration, he's not running for re-election. What does the timeline tell you and the fact that they're working together?
Well, the fact that they're working together tells me that the president, former president, should really be concerned, because whenever you have a coordinated investigation from 2 major prosecuting offices, one that has the virtually limitless resources of the state of New York, the other that is New York City, you have to consider the fact that they're going to be sharing information, they're going to be sharing documents, they're going to be combing through these documents. And then there are a lot of also potential felonies that exist in the state, such as offering a false instrument for filing, which is a Class E felony. And they can run cumulatively. So if you find that they've filed false documents hundreds of times, thousands of times, and perhaps you have multiple employees also engaging in the filing of these false documents, which they may know are not accurate, those are all potential witnesses against Donald Trump and the organization. And these are people that prosecutors probably would not be interested in going after per se on their own, but they might say, hey, well, what do you know? And when you start to look at the documents, they're really not subject to personal whim. They don't really have an agenda. The documents are what they are. If I value a piece of property at $50 million today, and then this time next year it's $75 million, and no other similarly situated properties have that type of swing, it's a pretty easy thing. And at that point, the trier of fact, whether it's a judge or a jury, can infer intent. Now, as Doug says, and I think it's essential that we remember that he's innocent until proven guilty, the organization is innocent until proven guilty, and that should be the case for everyone, and we should never shatter that unless the prosecution shatters it. But it's a lot of evidence that's potentially out there. We're probably looking at terabyte and terabyte of documents that they're going to have to go through. It'll require a team that has particular expertise to really defend him well.
And you have also a lot of financial institutions that were part of this over the years. Deutsche Bank, and I can go up and down the list here, that aren't going to lie for the president for their own fears of exposure. Jimmy, there's a name that people are starting to hear about, but could be seismic if he is either compelled to cooperate or does so out of choice, and that is Mr. Weisselberg.
That's right.
You already have a spurned ex-daughter-in-law who's already said, listen, Trump wrote a basic check, but maybe because he was too cheap or trying to get around it, he would give gifts in kind that were never declared or otherwise here. Weisselberg goes back to Fred Trump, the old man. He knows where everybody's buried. And if the kid or the extended family could be facing some real trouble and he flips, then you got real worries if you're Trump on top of the concerns now.
That's what I was saying before, and to Mayo's point, yes, you can infer certain things from what documents say. You're not going to cross-examine the document, but you do need, as the question to Michael Cohen was posed, knowledge and intent. And with just a document, the defendant Trump can say, look, you know, I'm at the top. There's no way I control everything that's going on. If this gentleman flips, this man has an encyclopedic knowledge of the Trump organization from its inception throughout. And this is a man who dealt directly with the president, took his orders from the president, and was responsible for the creation and submission of many of these documents.
And there is another thing which I know, listen, people go to jail for fraud every day in this country, okay? So it's not like, you know, they're creating basically a charge that's unique here to this president. But if it's tactile, if people understand what this fraud is and they say, wait a minute, I can't do that when I got to pay my taxes in April in a normal year, what's he doing? And it's not even that. It's also stuff like gifting this or that or the other thing, or using the Trump Foundation or the organization or whatever it is to do really shady stuff and screw people out of other things. If that comes out, even the defenders of the president, it becomes a lot less sympathetic when you can touch it. And I think that's part of the case that the prosecution has to make here, more than just the dollars and cents, if they want a broadly accepted verdict. But we're going way down the line. Okay, when we come back here, we're going to discuss an anniversary that just passed, but what has changed or not changed over the past year, police reforms happening in the wake of George Floyd's death, and how close Congress is to passing sweeping legislation to address issues when it comes to law enforcement.